Thank you. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Good afternoon, fellow Toastmasters. Now that you're here, now what? Yes, this is a play on Ursula's title, but an opportunity to point out some of the subtleties of what we're learning here about leadership and how they play into my leadership style. I'll build on we'll talk about how we build these tight schedules, what I think is the key to implementing them effectively. And basically, I think that's setting expectations and being flexible. So I took the leadership questionnaire and I found that I scored evenly between a lot of these categories. I was leaning less towards bureaucratic and authoritative and more towards democratic and altruistic, which I was happy to see in the end there. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I thought that was pretty interesting that I was fairly even across some of these different areas. So as Miriam mentioned, I put on a big event this last week. It was a big stakeholder meeting for my program, and it wasn't as stressful as some of these meetings have been in the past. So why? Well, because of Toastmasters, right? We put on meetings all the time. We have lots of experience with that. But another reason that it wasn't as stressful is that it was outside. It was a field trip. And I, just like so many of us here, I'm exhausted by Zoom meetings. And so if you put me in charge of putting together a meeting, more often than not, you're going to get a field trip, especially at this point. So I set out the notice and I started getting in the RSVPs. And all of a sudden, I had 45 people coming.
Wow.
You do a tour for 45 people. That was pretty challenging. And not only that, but these were people from different local, state, and federal agencies. I had the furthest person I had coming from Sacramento. So my original plan to kind of cruise around and give a tour and talk about stuff, I just didn't think that was going to work. I really needed to step up my game. I needed to get organized and really put on a nice meeting for folks that would be engaged. And so how do you do that? One of the things I did is I thought, well, I don't need to talk all the time. I'm going to get speakers. I'm going to get the experts who are doing all this work to talk about it. So once I started asking speakers, staff and students and things who wanted to do speaking, I came up with 10 people that wanted to speak. So all of a sudden I had to fit this into a really tight agenda. So we know how to do this, right? We do these agendas all the time. But one of the things that I find is when I first started looking at these agendas, I said, yeah, okay, we have these 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute time slots. That's great. We can do that because we know this material. We know our roles. We do it over and over again every week. But how do you take that and go into the real world? I just didn't think that was possible. But because I had all of these people, I had to figure out how to do that. And my initial vision of this meeting was kind of to take, because we're in COVID and people haven't been out, was to kind of take this stakeholder meeting, which is usually like a big brainstorming meeting, and we talk a lot, we talk about different things, to take that outside, literally to take our tables and chairs and put them out in the middle of the marsh and have this session out there that could give us these new perspectives and new ideas. Well, once I thought about the logistics of that, yeah, no, with 10 speakers, that one went out the window quick. I had to figure out what could we actually pull off. And so it gets me to the next part. How do you implement a meeting like this? So how do we pull this off every week? And I think it's because we set expectations. Everybody knows their roles and they understand the transitions and they know how the meeting functions. So what happens when you don't have that? Meetings take longer, speeches take longer, all of that. You have these areas of disorganization. And one of the things that brought this to my mind and brought this into focus for me was our backwards meetings. So when we do a backwards meeting, we start at the end and we go to the front. And oftentimes those meetings will fall apart in different places. And I think that that's because people don't have clear expectations about what those transitions are supposed to look like, and whether or not they're supposed to be going backwards on something, or what kind of information they're supposed to clue in so that people ahead of them know what they're supposed to do. And so what I did is I enlisted my staff and other people that were part of the organization that were going to be there. And I asked them, we've got a huge group. Can you stand back so other people can get in and hear? Can you help? Can you maybe not have side conversations because we have 45 people we're trying to move around the marsh, and then help move. So setting those expectations for what people are going to do. And for the speakers, 2 minutes. 2 minutes each speaker, one clear message. Because if we've got 10 speakers, you've got 10 messages. That's a lot. That's a lot to remember. So enlisting the staff, moving them around. Then this comes to the last part, flexibility. So my last message to my speakers were, okay, we've got everything really well planned out, but it might not work, right? It's a big meeting. It's a lot of people. So just have fun with it. Be flexible, have fun with it. And that ended up happening where somebody in the audience asked a question to one person and they ended up giving somebody else's speech. So I went around the crowd, went to that speaker who was coming up into two next speeches, and I said, do you want to skip it? Or would you like to talk about something else? And the first thing she said is, I want to skip it. And then as I turned away, she says, oh no, I'll talk about something else that I'm working on. I'll talk about denitrification. That'll be great. So that worked out good. And we were really flexible. And so this meeting that I envisioned ended up being the group of people, 45 people got together. I did a quick icebreaker asking everybody to tell me one word about how they felt. So I had 45 adjectives describing how these people felt standing out in the middle of the marsh. We moved around to 10 speakers. We got out to this place on the edge of the channel with the seals and the birds. They had lunch, hanging out, and all talking about what they were working on. So getting back to my leadership style, when I took the survey and I felt that I had a little bit of everything, that ended up sort of being the key for me. I think that we need to develop our skills in all of these different leadership styles, because there are some times when you need to step up and make a decision. And there's other times when you can let the group make the decision and let it all evolve organically. So these are subtle skills we're learning. I'd say practice them, play with them, and learn how to use them effectively as you go through your work and your other skills that you're trying to do. Thank you very much, Madam Toastmaster.